Good afternoon, White Pine County School District. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. Happy to have you joining us, and so thankful to be able to have a great discussion with my friends and colleagues, Janine Collins and Juliana Charlie Brown. These two women are educational thought leaders, innovators, and partners in the work of trying to transform Nevada's educational system to what is next in the journey. So thank you, ladies, for joining me today, and appreciate your time and happy to be able to visit with you a little bit today. Can I ask you to introduce yourselves and the organizations that you work with and what you're most excited about with this work? And Charlie, let's start with you if that's okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Superintendent, and nice to meet you all virtually, White Pine School District. I've had the great pleasure to get to know a few of you, and I look forward to getting to know a great many more of you over the course of our work together. So as Superintendent mentioned, I go by my middle name, Charlie. I work for an organization called Knowledge Works, and what we do is we have the great privilege to work all across the country to help learning communities who are looking to reimagine the way that learning happens, right? So what we know is that in sort of its most traditional forms and in the way that school has been done for many, many years, it's worked really well for some learners and not so well for other learners. And so we try to take a step back and ask, what is it about the way that we've set school up, about the way that we structure the school day, the way that we align our experiences, and the types of things that we ask learners to do? And how can we reimagine a future of learning that really authentically engages every learner? And that looks like a lot of different things depending on what your learning community is interested in, the context that you live in. And so we've had the fortune to be engaging in that work here in the state of Nevada for a few years now, and look forward to continuing to do it in partnership with y'all for many more years. Janine, to you.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you, Superintendent. It's great to be here. Janine Collins. My role is Chief Innovation Officer with Ed Extraordinary. We are a small unit that works inside Teach for America, Nevada, to focus on a lot of the same things that you heard Charlie just talk about. How do we reinvent, move learning forward so that everybody's getting what they need to thrive, so that people are having deeper learning experiences where they are actively pursuing connections between themselves and their community, and are really exploring the context of what they're learning about. Oftentimes that looks like project-based learning, hands-on learning, showing things in public, and also joyful. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a state of happiness all of the time, but that there's a sense of purpose and meaning and connection that comes from the learning that you do. So we are also thrilled to be partnering with the Nevada Department of Education and Knowledge Works in this work of having built a Nevada Portrait of a Learner and pursuing the development from that work of the Nevada Future of Learning Network. So again, just such exciting work as a former educator in K-12 schools. It just feels like such a wonderful time to be really having these real conversations and threading together all of these different perspectives to really move Nevada forward.
Thank you. So, Janine, you mentioned there the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, as well as the Nevada Future of Learning Network. So let's talk about those two items and maybe start with the Portrait of a Learner. What is that for folks who have never heard of it before? How is it different from kind of the current model that exists? And how is it helpful for educators and for communities to use it as a tool for thinking about what education can be?
Yeah, absolutely. So when systems of any size are looking to transform what they do, it's really important that there is a clear vision of what you're trying to transform into. And so oftentimes a school or a district or a state will build what's called a portrait of a learner or a profile of a graduate. And what that is really a vision of the broader set of outcomes, the mindset, skills, and knowledge that are really essential to embody so that we can live and work and learn in the reality of the world that we're in and into a rapidly evolving future. And so when you think about how that lines up with some of the things we currently think about regarding school, I think the best way to describe it is it's a broader set of outcomes. It's not a replacement of the need to learn how to read or to do basic math. But what it is a recognition that the skills like, and things that showed up in our profile, our portrait, creativity, collaboration, problem solving. It's really the how, the application of knowledge, so that young people and older people, all of us are learners. How might we really embody these more durable skills that are going to help us transfer what we know so that we can thrive in any environment? And so we began this work back in October of 22 as a statewide community to listen and learn from Nevadans around what did they believe that young people need to be and just to how to be in the world. And we had deeper conversations around what is a good life and a thriving community and the role of school in helping us get there. And then really thinking about what are those durable skills that have helped you succeed or that you need to, and we had business community members respond to that. We had educators respond to that. We had caregivers respond to that. Importantly, we had young people respond to that who have so much good information and ideas about what they need in this moment. And through a lot of iteration and community conversations and focus groups and refining, we were able to build what is now called the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, which is broken. You can see it at portrait.nvfutureoflearning.org, and you can check it out and see how it really is defining a broader set of outcomes for success. And Charlie, I think I might pass it to you to talk about how with this network that we're building around the portrait, we're bringing so many different members and of our community together to actually make it come to life.
Yeah, to do that, I can kind of take a step back and say a little bit about how we've seen this go in some other learning communities where we've done a portrait, right? So a lot of times there's a broad agreement to say, hey, we need to do something different, right? Our young people are not graduating prepared to do these critical things like collaborate effectively in rapidly changing workplaces or think critically about problems where they haven't been given a precise process to work through them, right? We really need our young people to have these skills. So learning communities will engage in this really robust process. And then it becomes like and now what do we do with this? If we have this and we know we're going to take this really ambitious reimagining of our goals for what we want school to do, we now know we actually need to do a whole lot of things differently in the way we do school. And so when we think about the network is really the place where that work is going to begin to happen. And in a couple of different important ways, right? So the network is a place where we want to support our local communities like White Pine in thinking, so if this is the state's portrait of a graduate, what does that mean for us here in our community? And what does that mean for our educators in the classroom with our learners? It's also a place where we can continue to work across communities in the state and say, if we're doing a really cool project that helps us learn collaboration in White Pine, how might we work with folks from Lincoln County who are doing a similar thing? And because we have that portrait, we actually can kind of talk to each other using the same language. And so the opportunities for us to change as a network within the state together, but also have a very unique community embedded experience with the portrait become really, really powerful when we are working in that network space. And so that's really the goal for the Nevada Future of Learning Network. And there's a whole bunch of different things and ways communities can be involved. And again, we'll put that link down in the comments so that you can visit the portrait and the network website. And critically, I think another really powerful thing is that we see in the state of Nevada is that there's folks who have energy for this work at various levels of the system. So we see folks who are doing this work in classrooms. We see district leaders who are engaged and involved in this work, who are elevating real policy considerations about what may change. And then we're working with the state, right? And so to have a place where collaboration can happen across all the levels of the system is really going to be powerful. We don't often see that in every community we work in, so you may have some real energy at the local level, but maybe the state doesn't really have their mind wrapped around what it means. So for you all to have so many different folks who are involved in this work through the Nevada Future of Learning Network, it feels like a really exciting moment to be a part of.
Thank you both. Yeah, and you both know that we're locally working here in White Pine on our portrait of a leader, aspiring to have our system be one that helps students cultivate experiences where they can exercise leadership. We certainly feel like we have some strengths with that. We also acknowledge that we have a really, really long way to go, but are excited to continue that visioning process. I think one thing that I heard you both say is that without that in place, without that end, portrait, it's a really great analogy and kind of filled in with lots of detail. Without that portrait in place, it's hard to know sometimes what all of the hard work is getting you towards. So I really have appreciated being a part of that. And I know that we have a couple of folks who are excited to attend the conference here in a few weeks, the convening. So one thing that I think I've talked with both of you about in the past is through the kind of the Nation at Risk, the Coleman reports, the No Child Left Behind era of schooling, which for the three of us, that's been what we experienced, not only probably as young people in the system, but also as educators. I remember I think it was my first year as a high school principal was the year that No Child Left Behind was rolled out. And it was so prescriptive and top-down driven, and really it felt like as an educator in the system that its purpose was to really narrow the scope of what schools ought to pay attention to, and then to implement a compliance-based system to make sure that people who are in the system were doing their job, right? Either whether that's the educators or the families or the students, of course, monitored by testing. And it feels like with this portrait work, and I think I heard it said, that this is intended to be a more broad and kind of all-encompassing, not that math in reading and science and those things are not important, but that they have an application, and that that application might look a little bit different from community to community. And like I was saying in ours, we're really grasping onto that leadership component of that. So I guess I'm curious as to how you see this work that's going on, kind of meshing with the remnants of No Child Left Behind in its current iteration of ESSA, and how this work might change some of that really narrow vision of what schools were supposed to be focusing on, which from my perspective as a former principal, still a teacher and a superintendent now, has caused so many systems to exclude things that we used to love about school, like performing arts and STEAM and current technical ed, and attending to students' individual needs. Those things have been kind of scrunched out because of that whole accountability movement, so I guess I'd like to hear how you view that and how you envision this work maybe helping us transition to a new and better vision of what schools could look like.
Yeah, that's the big question. I think if we can answer that one in the podcast, we'll have really made some headway here for the nation at large. I will say that I think that something that you touched on in your comment and in your question is a really important place to start, because I think that a lot of where what we see as resistance to changing the current system of assessment and accountability shows up as a fear that we're going to lose something, right? So a lot of times resistance to change comes from our fear. And I think that sometimes we think, well, if we're going to focus on these other things, we might lose out on literacy, basic math skills, right? And I think it's actually very, very important to emphasize this point of application. So when we look at the brain science and we talk about reimagining the goals for learning, when you tie the learning of basic literacy skills, foundational math skills, even more complex curriculum that is tied to the traditional disciplines, when you tie that to cross-cutting skills, so you can say, like, sit down and learn this calculus formula because I said so, because it's in my standards book and you have to, very different than we're actually going to engage you in a really critical problem solving activity, and you get to use this cool trick. And that cool trick is actually called calculus. It's a totally different conversation with a learner because you're helping them to understand what is the value of this thing. Why is math cool? It's because math helps me solve problems. I want to know math, therefore math sticks in my brain better. So when we talk about this, like, if you focus on these other more transferable skills, then you're not focusing on this. I say actually focusing on these skills helps you better learn those more technical, rigorous, even highly complex literacies that we start to see in the high school space at the sort of endpoint of our standards frameworks. And I say all that to say is that I think that there are a lot of conversations like that when we talk about assessment and accountability, that this more holistic, personalized, competency-based methodology of learning, it helps us get away from this either or sense. It's not that we're going to lose literacy in favor of other skills. We're going to do both better together. And I think that's also true when we talk about some of our deeper accountability measures. We're not saying we don't want schools to be accountable. And I wouldn't actually say I've met very many educators in my life who don't want to be accountable to the school students, families, and communities that they serve. They want that, but they want to be accountable to the right things. And so if we're saying we're actually going to articulate a better vision for what the right things are, then we can build a better accountability system. And I think it's kind of that simple, although once you start to get under the hood, it gets a little bit more technical. But when you start to get a better vision of what you want to do, you align your measures to that, and the whole system starts to improve.
I'm not sure that I have much to add to that. I thought Charlie did a really great job of like breaking all of those pieces down. I think the thing I might just want to highlight that I think comes up a lot is when the way we do school was designed, when that was designed, like the things that we know now due to learning science, how the brain works, are not things that were part of that design. And just from like a boots on the ground perspective, having engaged with so many people across Nevada over the last year, I think that what I heard is a real recognition that the status quo approach just doesn't work. Young people will tell you that. Adults inside the education system who feel stuck sort of between the reality of what they feel their learners need and what is important and what they feel like they're being asked to do, like they will surface that. And I say this a lot when I'm talking about it, is that I think there's this recognition that people are whole people and that there isn't one way to be smart. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to know how things that we think are important, how those concepts are developing for young people. But to Charlie's point, if we can situate it in such a way where there's purpose and connectivity, humans aren't fragmented. We have a lot of fragments that have been designed and kind of pushed on people to execute on what learning looks like, but people are whole. And so I think the concept of personalized competency-based learning invites the recognition of that and invites us to rethink in those ways. And I think there's a fair amount of unlearning and conversations that have to happen to be able to move forward together. But that also is a wonderful invitation, and it's a wonderful invitation to look at what is working and what we need to keep as we move forward into something that really meets who people are right now and what is needed.
Yeah, I appreciate those responses from both of you. And it just makes me think so much, again, because in education, I think it's so easy to get trapped in that model of, is what I am doing in my classroom going to yield the results, which I use in air quotes, that, the system has been designed to expect. And of course, sometimes people outside of the system say, well, wait a minute, you are the system. But it's like, well, there's a lot of those things that for, a math teacher, a fourth grade teacher, a music teacher, whatever, it's, they don't have a lot of control over some of those elements. And I think the opportunity to participate in some of this work highlights those voices, not only from the educators, but from students as well, which is, like you said, where we really need to hear from. The other thing that comes to mind is that, and I guess I'm thinking a little bit back on the assessment piece of this, is that if we differentiate on the input side of things based on students' needs, because we know that learners are at different levels. And I think teachers work really hard within the framework that they currently have to differentiate on the input side of things so that they can meet students where they are. But if we continue to only assess students in a one-size-fits-all model, then it really doesn't take into account the differentiation that is done on the input side of things, because there is no differentiation on the outcome side of things. And that I see a lot of conflict there that needs to be resolved, which can be, I think, done by having a clearer vision of what we want the system to be about and to evolve to. But so with that as context, I guess I'm a little curious as to your thoughts on how does assessment look in this new kind of re-envisioned model of learning. I heard one of you say, a lot of project-based types of things. Would it be fair to say that one student might be able to demonstrate literacy proficiency on a standardized test, but for another student, it might be a portfolio of work where that student is best able to highlight proficiency in literacy and similar types of concepts with math, and the other content areas as well. So does that question make sense as far as how do we start to kind of rethink some of those things? Because I think educators' minds are, whether it's right or wrong, I think we've been conditioned to think about that because of that ever-pressing demand on, my kids have to pass that test at the end of the year, which I hate that we talk about that, but it is a reality at this point in time. So I guess just curious about your thoughts on that.
I'm going to take it first pass, Janine, or do you want to go first? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Lots of thoughts on that, I think. And I sort of go back to the brilliance of the way that this work in Nevada is unfolding, right? Because I think that, like many things in education, assessment operates at different levels of our system, right? So we have some assessments in this country that are federally mandated by the nation's education law, right? No state chief has the legal right to say we can't do them. And there are also mechanisms by which we can innovate in those spaces. And what's really fascinating about the way this work is unfolding here is the depth of conversation that's going into reimagining the vision and putting in place a really strong vision. And what that will allow is a shared conversation across different levels of the system about assessment. So I say all that to say is, as an educator, say I am that fourth grade teacher in my classroom, and I start to change my practice to realign to this richer set of outcomes. In my classroom, I'm going to be doing classroom assessment to those richer set of outcomes over time. And my students are not just going to get one standard one time at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. they've got to take an assessment on that one standard and they haven't seen it for 6 months, and it's all very confusing, and that's sort of how our linear assessment models are set up now. But when we start to talk about these more transferable skills, we see them more often as learners. And so as we start to, so as a learner, I may have had a critical thinking or problem solving assessment or collaboration assessment multiple times, and that won't be a new experience for me. So when I get to something like a more high stakes assessment, be that my classroom high stakes assessment, be that some future version of a state assessment, it doesn't feel as disconnected for me because I've been practicing that skill many times over time. And so I think that there's a real opportunity with that more meaningful shared vision to then start to build more robust but aligned assessment systems. Because we're not saying we're okay with students not achieving at high levels. We want all learners to achieve at high levels. And we know that different ways of expression, different models of showing what you know are going to ensure that every learner has the opportunity to demonstrate that they have achieved to high levels. So a couple of different ideas in there, but I just think that you really get to this with that shared vision from the portrait and the aligned work that can now happen across the different levels of the system. You start to build the framework for a balanced system of assessment.
I think what I would add to that too is that, Charlie, you talked a little bit about how just the depth of conversation that's unfolding around the vision. And I think alongside that is this really intentional approach to really put in structures for co-creation along the way of this work. And I think that along with a shift in a model, it can't just be done in a way that's top down, right? Like, we're going to shift to this portrait and we're going to then tell you what that means and then have you implement it exactly like this in this top down model. Like, if the values of the portrait are actually to be embodied, then the process by which we implement the portrait has to mirror those. So when we are talking about, the first question on the portrait, like, how will I grow in my learning? I mean, I think that's a question for every member of the network, whatever age they are as a learner. Like, how are we going to grow in our learning this year? And there is an agency and empowerment that comes from asking that question, because there is personal and collective definition and meaning making that has to happen to be able to live into those values. And so I think it is not as simple as saying, great, we're going to replace this set of metrics with these, and now that means project-based learning for all. It's not that. And I think that a lot of times when I'm talking with people, I think they're looking for that kind of transactional answer. If not this, then this. And that is not the spirit of this work. The spirit of this work is we really, really are trying to live into these values of co-creation, which means we are building something new together. And as a performing arts teacher, that's something that I did with my students. And as I was listening to Charlie sort of brilliantly talk about, you're not going to see one standard at the beginning of the year and then have to take a test on it. Like, we would work on skills and standards all year in multiple ways. And then they would be building projects, and there would be multiple times for them to present their learning. And I feel like there's a lot of synergy with that, thinking about learning in that way. And also, it was not just, I'm going to teach you these skills, now demonstrate them. It's, I'm helping you, now what are you doing with them? And so in the same way that we want to do that in classrooms, we're really trying to do that with our community as we build this work. And I think that doing that, in my own recognition, that takes time. In a lot of ways, it would be easier to just say, out with this, in with this, 2 years from now, this is what it's going to look like, go. And I'll say that, like, in the pilot work we did with our portrait schools, I think there was absolutely like, well, what is this supposed to look like? And then the answer would be like, well, what is this supposed to look like? What do you think it needs to look like? How does this align with what students need? How does this line up with your standards? What is it that you want to see them be able to do? And it really requires us to, like, challenge our assumptions and shift our paradigm around, like, how we make these decisions. And to Charlie's point, like, I think all educators, we want to be accountable to young people in our community for the work. And so that requires some deeper thinking and some deeper rethinking around what that evidence of learning really can look like so that it matters to everybody. So these are not quick changes, but what great work, and how cool to be able to create a space. Your earlier question, I think, Superintendent, too, which is like that educators and community and young people who we are accountable to and who are a part of this can help build that, and that it is not being done to them, but they can help actually define what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that's just to double click on one thing that you said, Janine. This work takes time. And I think this is like a big problem with our national conversation about assessment change. People are just like, oop, like the existing system doesn't work. This assessment vendor tells me they can fix it with this thing that's going to be implemented in the next school year. Let's go for it. And it's like, it takes a lot more time to realign to a shared vision and then imagine what that means for assessment, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to say, we're not sure about our goals. We're not sure about how we're working in the classroom to make those goals real, but let's first change how we measure what we're doing and expect the result to be fundamentally different. Like that theory of change, that if we change the assessments first, it's going to change all those other pieces, I think is a little bit flawed. And I think that's what's so cool about how y'all are doing it here in Nevada, is you're starting with that vision piece.
Yeah. I really appreciate those comments. I was thinking about a class that I took over the course of the summer, and it was an economics and education class. And one of the big conflicts that the professor kept emphasizing was and I don't think it's just in education, it seems like it's in life in general, that sometimes there is an either or when we talk about efficiency on one side versus effectiveness on the other side. Like I like to think a lot of times that the answer can be and it probably is in this case too, but there's some real tension between what I think both of you hit on this, that the top-down model, it can be relatively quick, as quick as bureaucracies are, and very directive and very compliance-based, and you can change a lot of a system. But then the argument is as well, is it really an effective change? It's a change in name only. And you know, again, having been a principal through the entire No Child Left Behind era, I mean, certainly the system changed, but was it an effective change? And I can't say that for sure. There were some positive things that came out of it, but attending to the holistic and durable set of skills, as you both were emphasizing on those, that wasn't necessarily part of the change. So yeah. So tonight, in fact, in just about an hour or so, we're having one of our district leader workshops of our draft, which I'm really excited about. So we're going to have some great, robust conversations, some feedback, some criticism, and then we'll have a couple chances to do that with different sets of students within our school district as well, as we continue on our work on building kind of our local vision of this. So I'm really excited about that, and I appreciate the leadership that both of you have shown, and just the thoughts that you have, both of you, as well as leaders in other leaders in our state and our districts, and the Department of Education. It's nice to be able to have the conversation and have a safe place to be able to develop some of these ideas and really work towards becoming effective, in favor of just being efficient, if you can even call it being efficient, because you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's the right word or not, but so anyway, thank you both so much for your time today. I just really appreciate both of you, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you. Any parting comments?
I will just say that I think you all are doing fantastic work. I hope folks continue to stay engaged, and I'm really excited to see what the great state of Nevada does with this.
I've been, I'm a lifelong Nevadan and an educator, and a colleague said to me recently You know, Janine, I don't know that I've seen something in recent history that I can remember where so many educators were involved in really just visioning and starting to build the layers of what this could look like. And I think as somebody inside of this work and as a Nevadan, I'm very proud of the fact that there really is so much community involvement and awareness and excitement around what's possible. And I think because we are creating this network space, we're going to be able to work on those really hairy questions that you brought up, because that is the work. And the questions aren't a problem. They're the way forward. And I think that if we're together and we're asking those questions and we're not afraid of them, we're excited by them, I predict some really great things are going to happen. And I appreciate leaders like you who are creating a space for us to just think together. It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you both so much. And I will see you in a couple weeks, I think, both of you probably, right?
I look forward to that.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Superintendent.